Well, for the past year, I started out speaking about the Lord's Prayer, which I didn't think was going to last this long, but we might be done by Christmas time. We've now reached Thy will be done. And the disciples asked Jesus specifically to teach them how to pray. And if there was one thing that I would want to ask Jesus, it would be, teach me how to pray. Well, he did. And he taught us to address God as his Father, implying that we are all brothers and sisters. We're all one family. The Father is distinct and holy. The Father is a person. He's a who, not some giant force of which everything consists. He is not his kingdom, but he's very much in charge. So today we will consider Thy will be done. Last time it was Thy kingdom come. Now it's Thy will be done. Well, what is God's will? We often hear, oh, it must have been God's will. Or, God willing, we'll make it. What does that mean? What is your will? Isn't it based on who you are? What is God's will? Of what do you consist? What characterizes you, and what are God's characteristics? Well, this could be a really long sermon, but I'm going to consider just a few of God's characteristics, which is just who he is. Let's begin with love. Love implies more than one. Genuine love consists in someone to love and someone who loves them in return. Love takes two minimum. Well, what's the maximum? Not sure. The Bible says, love the Lord with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself. And the song says, they will know we are Christians by our love. Underline this. If love is plural, God is plural. And that's something I believe. Here's an illustration that I found useful in trying to understand the Trinity. Imagine three persons dancing, going around a circle and moving together. Each one is focusing on the other two. It's about the other. It's about the unity they have together. I took a picture. I didn't take a picture. Sandy took a picture. It's on the front of your bulletin. And it's not very clear. But there's three people dancing. We were in Athens. And they came out. And they were dancing all around together. And they were trying to get everybody in the restaurant to join them. Well, pretty soon there were a few brave souls who, joined them. And it was just a fun time. They were up there walking around, dancing, and it was a good experience. It's about the other person. They were about including everyone. Unfortunately, I grew up in a religious community that insisted that dancing was not to be tolerated. Dancing was evil, and we did not dance. How ridiculous and unnatural is that? Little children all know how to move and dance, and they're so cute when they do it. Dancing is a worldwide form of expression, and the Bible is littered with it. Well, one of my favorite memories is my trio was playing in Rapid City for the bar convention. That's, attorneys and judges. And the guests were socializing. We were in this large courtyard in the middle of a hotel. The hotel was all around. The courtyard was in the middle. And the music was all around. But there was another group meeting at the convention center. It was a small group. It was a support group for Down's children. Well, they must have taken a break, and these kids headed toward the music. And if you know anything about Down syndrome, those kids love music. There were probably 20 of them, and they came out of one of the hallways into the courtyard. And they were fascinated by the drums and percussion, and they were all moving to the music, and they were just coming toward the piano and the people around me. It was like a tiny little army. And they especially liked the happy Brazilian music. And pretty soon the kids were on the stage. And they were totally amazed at this great big violin or guitar. It was Lonnie's stand-up bass. And Clacy was playing the drums. They were not interested in me. It looked like I was sitting at a desk in the middle of all this fun. But all those straight-laced attorneys and judges, they were captivated by the scene. They were smiling, and they were moving around like the kids were. It was sheer enjoyment. Happiness was everywhere, and it was spontaneous. And I'll never forget. Now contrast that with a solo dancer, wanting all the attention because he thinks he can move better than anybody else. All eyes are on him. It's all about him. The three dancers trying to get the crowd to join them, and the single dancer by himself is the difference between the Trinity and Satan. Real love is always about the other, and others are all about each other, including you. God, the Trinity, is always about the other, and it includes you. Selfishness and unselfishness make all the difference when it comes to love. A song from my youth said, "One is the loneliest number you will ever hear." Maybe Mr. Rogers said it best when he answered, "The greatest thing we can do is help somebody know that they are loved and capable of loving." That's the neighborhood I want to live in. Kind of sounds like God's neighborhood. Dear Lord, teach me to love the people around me, to carry their burdens, to bear their pain, to touch their sadness, so that the hope of your presence is present in their lives. May I be the second that betters their one. So what else is God's will? Well, gratitude, gratefulness, being grateful for what? For his many blessings, past, present, future. How have you been blessed? Well, hopefully, if I would ask each one of you that question, we would be here until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Do you realize that the very first commandment to human beings in the Garden of Delight, because that's what Eden means, is delight, the very first command was, from every tree in the garden you must eat. If we don't enjoy life's pleasures, we will be disappointing God. Too often we're so focused on original sin that we forget about original pleasure. The desire for pleasure is not wrong. God built us for it. When I was 15 years old, I just finished my sophomore year in high school at Mount Vernon. I got my first job. Mom and Dad had moved into a modern house that they had built on 5 acres. Actually, I went to academy in September. They moved into the house in October, and then it was May. School was out. So that was my first summer there. I didn't know anybody, but the neighbor, Mrs. Disher, wondered if I would like a job. What kind of a job? Picking strawberries. Well, I love strawberries. And they don't sell Ohio strawberries here because they're not very good to be shipped. But boy, are they good to eat. They're smaller, they're juicier, they have a little different flavor, they're wonderful. I loved them, and I still do, but I rarely get to taste them anymore. So I said, you bet, Mrs. Disher, what do I have to do? Well, she took me outside and to a place that was between our house and her house and showed me a strawberry patch. It was like strawberry heaven. I had to fill pint containers with strawberries, ripe, delicious strawberries, and the season would last about 3 weeks. But I learned that the pleasure, the blessing of eating perfect strawberries decreases when you eat too many. You can overdo any pleasure. In fact, when I did that, the first strawberry I picked, I ate. Who likes chocolate? Everybody. Have you ever eaten an entire chocolate Easter bunny? I did when I was little. It was about 6 inches tall and solid, but I ate the whole thing. Have any of you ever eaten too much chocolate? Well, back to Mrs. Disher's strawberry patch. By the end of the 3 weeks, I ate very few strawberries. In the German language, and I also think in Russian, strawberries are called Erdbeeren, which means earth berries, because they're way down there where your feet live. You have to bend and stoop and get on your hands and knees to pick those little buggers. And 3/4 of an acre is a lot of bending and crouching. Actually, it took me a while before I really liked strawberries again. At a Jewish wedding, the first blessing said at every wedding is what I call the sex blessing. And here it is. Be grateful for the consciousness to make love to those with whom we are meant to make love. If we don't enjoy God's blessing, we'll be disappointing God. He made us to enjoy life. Jewish tradition encourages us to say 100 blessings per day. Well, that's kind of a metaphor for as many times as possible, but it's symbolic of the 100 sockets that held the ancient tabernacle together. From the marriage of two people to a pair of new shoes, from a delicious meal to a new home, blessing is gratitude practice. When we pause to recognize the gifts we've been given, it's amazing how much happier we are. Here's a quote. Someone else is dreaming about the job you have, the home you complain about, Tammy, the smile you forgot to wear, the health you take for granted. Don't let difficult times make you forget your blessings. And that's a direct quote from Facebook. No matter how generous you are, you will never satisfy an ungrateful person. Life is a series of moments, pleasures, moment happinesses, and the most significant thing is that we're here to enjoy them. Even those who lived in death camps desperately held on to life. We should be grateful for the life we have now and look back and count the blessings of the past. And it's God's will that we look forward in anticipation for life in the new world of delights. Может быть. That's one of my favorite Russian words. I just like to say it, which means perhaps. Может быть. Perhaps I should stop here and then you'd be all grateful that I'm finished. But I'd like to examine one other aspect of God's will. Thy will be done. Not only are we to love one another as Jesus loved us, and be grateful for life such as it is, but we are to cooperate with his designs for living as Jesus would have us live. Pretty much everywhere we look, we see two opposites: cooperation and competition. Every culture has its particular excesses and pathology, and ours is competition. Getting ahead, success at all costs, the quicker the better, and we are sports crazy. Boxing is competition, dancing is cooperation. But not all boxing is competition, and not all dancing is cooperation. If you wish to become a member of an orchestra, you can only play one part. You can't be the French horn, the cello, the timpani, the flute all at the same time. And you can't learn the guitar overnight. It takes hard work and repetition and talent. In order to do your part, you must work at it over and over. In fact, God wants us to develop the talents that we have. I like golfing. I like golf. And it can make a good illustration. I played golf for the first time when I was 50 years old. I played a lot. I worked at driving the ball, hitting it a long way and preferably straight. I'd go to the practice range and I'd hit it 100 yards, 50 yards, 150 yards, and as hard as I could, which was farther than that. Then I'd go on the putting greens and I'd practice putting from 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, over and over. Turns out I got pretty good. Good enough not to embarrass myself on a golf course. That was my goal. One time, and only one time, I parred the course in pier. In golf, more than most sports, you are really playing against yourself. You're competing against yourself and the course. And there are rules in golf. But most people cheat if they can. Kind of like life. Sandy started playing golf at the age of 60, and she was a natural. But she needed practice. So we made up some of our own rules, like 3 off a tee. She got more practice and it made the game more fun. And one of my favorite ways to play golf is in a scramble, in which there's usually 3 or 4, usually 4, people playing together, cooperation. In a scramble, each player hits off the tee, and the best ball is where the second shot comes from. So you pick up your ball, move it to where the best shot was. And then you hit the next shot. And then you lift up your ball and take it to where the best shot was. Finally, you get to the green, and you all putt from the same place. And the idea is to see if you can combine all of your good shots and get a score low enough that you can beat the course, which is still hard to do. Instead of a solo sport, the foursome or threesome becomes a team playing together. Well, my absolute favorite experience of all, playing golf out at Hillsview, was one day there was a tournament on the and Sandy and I and somebody else, I don't remember who it was, made a threesome. And we were playing the 11th hole out there. And the 11th hole at Hillsview is a par 5, meaning it takes 5, you should get your ball from the tee to the cup in 5 shots. But this particular hole had special rules, because usually in a scramble they make some, closest to the pin or straightest down the fairway and all kinds of stuff. Well, this hole had special rules. And the rule was you could pick one club, and whatever club you picked, that's what you had to use for the entire hole. So there's 3 of us on a par 5. So we decided, because the ladies' tee box was way farther ahead, that we would use Sandy's tee shot. That would be the first shot that we'd use. So here she is all nervous because they're going to use my shot. Well, she drove it a little bit farther and straight. She could drive straight. Actually, the first time she and I ever played golf with my son Kedrick, he got done. He hadn't said much during the game, and he told Sandy, he said, well, You can do something most people can't do. And she's going, what's that? He says, well, you can hit it straight off the tee. So we had a good tee shot. It was straight, farther than any of the other two could have done. The second shot was a good one, close to the green, and then I chipped the ball up on the green, and I got to about 15 feet from the cup. Well, that meant it was Sandy's turn again. And she had to use her driver to putt the ball. Well, nobody putts with their driver. Nobody practices putting with their driver. But that was the club she had to use. And you guessed it. She just rolled the ball right into the cup for a birdie, which is one less than par. We jumped for joy. It was really a grand moment. A combination of 4 shots, 2 of them by a beginner, and the last one was a 15-foot putt with a driver. Obviously, I'll never forget that. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just all get along? But that doesn't usually happen. Why? Because we're usually competing against someone. Does my hair look better than his? Are her clothes nicer than her rivals? Tammy's got a hot Camaro and I have an old beater. And she looks good in that hottie. You get it. We seem to enjoy blowing out someone else's lights because we think that'll make ours shine brighter. Let's face it, we're just plain, naturally selfish. Even when we don't mean to be. We use people and hurt them, and they're our family. Forgive me, Lord. Help me to be loving and grateful and unselfish. Help me to do your will. Thy will be done. And help me to think it, help me to say it, and help me to do it. May we all reflect your will more and more. That's my prayer today.